potential in it.
Mm. I was very struck some years ago, in fact 2010, returning from Juan Fernandez on in Navy transport, and we arrived in Valparaiso just in time for colors. And I'd seen colors in many countries, but that was a fine show. And the transport was put alongside the jetty in fine style. The ship was extremely well handled, and all the ships in harbour, people cared for these ships. They were well presented. It looked very, very good. And we then drove up through the port, and here was this great port full of ships of trade, some tourist ships, but there were ships loading all kinds of produce leaving Chile and coming into Chile. Chile is inevitably a maritime state. You know, the geography, as we heard at the beginning, if you look at it on the map and you don't see the sea, there's something very continental about your mindset. And it's not as if with Chile, the other side, it just peters off into some kind of open territory. The Andes is a pretty formidable barrier, and it says this is Chile, and over there isn't Chile. And it's as you fly into Santiago from the east, as you know, you come in over the high ground and you come straight down to the capital city. So yes, it has to be maritime because its connections are long and thin and maritime, and it extends out into the world in several directions, and it has access to enormous maritime resources which are of tremendous value. So yes, and I think the issue for Chile constantly has been, how does that rationalize itself? And in the 19th century, Chile ends up with antagonistic relations with its near neighbors, fights the odd war with its neighbors, but also it constantly maintains a level of naval activity to protect the vital commercial links which keep it engaged in international trade. And it's the thing that makes it stand out. It is the naval power of the region. There is no other navy in South America that operates at that standard. And that is a huge building block for the further development of what is already a maritime state. How much further that can go, that's again, it's a political question. How much further do people want to go? And if the political will is there, it can be done. And if the economy moves more and more towards the sea, then the identity will follow. Those two things work alongside each other. If you're not doing anything at sea, you can't create a maritime identity. If you're doing a lot at sea, the maritime identity sort of begins to shape itself. You know, when the Athenians become maritime, they're doing a lot of trade, and they extend that trade by taking control of islands and ports all along the trade routes. The Venetians do exactly the same. The Venetian Empire is a system of harbors which are 2 days rowing on a galley apart. You can row all the way from Venice to Alexandria, stopping off at ocean service stations, which are Venetian naval bases. That gives Venice a character. What it also means is that the Venetians, the Carthaginians, the Dutch to a large extent, and even the British put all of their best people into the Navy, and when they need more troops, historically, they tended to go and ask somebody else to sell them to them. The Venetian army were Italian, but they weren't Venetians. And if the Venetians lost a battle, they didn't mind. They just hired some more soldiers. The Dutch hired a very large number of people from Germany and Scandinavia in their army. The British were using mercenaries until the 1850s, because you don't put productive, skilled people into the army if you can avoid it. And you avoid letting the army dictate how the country is run, because the army is invariably connected with continental mindsets and a view of the world which is not as engaged or as maritime as you might need. So the British Army has never been, as the Royal Navy has been, a world-leading organization. As Admiral Fisher famously said, the army is a projectile to be fired by the Navy. In a maritime state, that's pretty much it. So that's the question. How do we shape that? Well, we shape it by recognizing what's strong and building on it.
I would